A badge of honor. Police officers and first responders wear badges to let their communities know they are here to protect and serve. But that's not how it feels today, and the stress of the job is taking its toll, taking lives through suicide and post-traumatic stress injury. A Badge of Honor podcast features the cast of the same name, Sam Horwitz and John Salerno. Sam, John, and the team offer the first responders workshops through their critical incident stress management teams and mental health liaisons to offer state-certified T-COLE credit programs that save lives. It's time to smash through the stigma. It's time to heal from your injury, and it's time to back our blue. Welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast. Here are your hosts, Sam Horwitz and John Salerno.
Hey, welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam. We are powered by the OBBM network. And man, we have an amazing show lined up for you today. Really holds near and dear to my heart. Fellow brothers from the NYPD. I think this is the first time we're really featuring the NYPD on our show. And we're blessed to have these 50 years experience combined of such highly trained detectives from the NYPD. So I can't wait to get these guys on and hear their stories, man. But first, let's talk about the stories that we had this weekend, man. When we talk about mental health wellness, we had an amazing workshop over at Garland PD with officers from all over around the surrounding areas. From, I think it was Garland, Grand Prairie, Rockwall. Am I missing any? We had 911 dispatch.
Yeah, Frisco. Roy City. It was great, and anywhere from kind of newer. So first 5 years when we talked about the first responders timeline to folks that have been on for a while, but
43 years.
The main thing, that's right. 43 years. The main thing that united us was, the stuff that we've seen throughout the years and experienced in our jobs, and how people dealt with the trauma. And I will say this was interesting because of that huge age difference of how people came where there was nothing at their departments when they first started to now what we're seeing in a lot of departments where they're giving the men and women time, if need be, to get healthy, or they've got programs that they're continuously allowing their membership to take part in. And that's the important thing, because John, we've said it. I mean, all these years we've been on, you as a chief, you want to have the best performing department. You want the community to rally around you when you need it, to sing your praises. The way you do that is to support your men and women that are out there every day. Yep. And
it's not always about gun tactics or takedown tactics or handcuff tactics. Mental health is a tactic, and it's something that we have to take serious throughout the even when we brought up the it's not only the visual, but it's the emotional aspect of the job. And so many people have clinged on to it. And I think we're growing, we're scratching the surface in mental health. And I think it's great. We're moving forward, not backwards, which is always a good thing in law enforcement. But the one thing that really held, which warmed my heart, was our 43-year member that was there, because we always talk about when the music stops and when we retire. Holy crap, what do we do now? Open up a bar, sit on what? And that's what I did. I opened up a bar. But he went back 3 times, because he loved the job. He had a love for the job so much. But I think deep down, he knew nothing else, but to serve his community. And he went back with such a great attitude, with such a great, nothing cynical. He was very into the community, and he just loved to perform works of service. And that really, to hear that from somebody who's got 43 years on a job, saying he loves to wake up every morning, go to his job, that means a chief is doing something right in your command.
Well, he's also stayed connected with his why, because we know that department, and we know that the chiefs have not always been on board with the mental health stuff. I mean, one of the chiefs doesn't even believe that PTSD is real. So for him to have those wellness and resiliency tactics and tools that he has utilized over the years, because he did a tour in Afghanistan as well, that says a lot. And I think it really helped, I'll call it the younger people in the room, understand how important your why is. And our two guests, I'm pretty sure they stayed connected with their why for a long time, because let's face it, you say NYPD these days, and it's like, I mean, for you and me, it's like, how in the world are you staying with that department, with the lack of leadership going on in the city? But these guys do a phenomenal job bringing stories to light on their podcast and their show. You can watch it. You can listen to it on Spotify. You can watch it on YouTube. The Gold Shield Show. John, do you want to explain what the Gold Shield means?
It's what every detective holds near and dear to their hearts. I'm glad that we got these guys on, because I want to listen to their podcast. I want to watch their show, because everybody, when you get that Gold Shield, when you're a detective, man, you're part of a brotherhood, just like Brothers in Blue. You are part of a special elite team. And Major Case, HIDA, JTTF, all these guys come together with their investigative skills. And Dan Murphy and Tom Smith really highlight some of the cases of these officers, and not only the NYPD officers, but officers across the nation. And we all enjoy that. That's what we love. This is the real, true life stuff that goes on. It's not Law and Order on TV. It's not FBI on TV. It's real guys and men and women who did the job, who investigated, who really solved crimes and put these criminals away for a long time, man. And that right there is community service in a whole. So their show really brings together a nation of detectives that really do a great work for our men and for our civilian
well,
population.
Let's welcome them. Tom and Dan, welcome to a Badge of Honor podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Man,
you bet.
You want to start, Sam? You want me to
who wants to tell the story?
Yeah, the NYPD. We can talk about anything, because you're both retired. We don't have to worry about CCRBs or anything. So you guys, boom, let's go. So Dan, start with a little bit about your history.
Sure. I grew up in Queens, mostly. Came on a job when I was 21 in February of 1984. And I really hadn't known until about a year or two before that I really wanted to do that for a living. My uncle was very influential to me. Came on and worked in Brooklyn North and NSU at a time in 1984 when things were pretty much out of control. There was a
Where in the North? Where in Brooklyn North?
15 out of the 90, 83.
Oh, no. I was in the 7-7.
Oh, okay. You were 14, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And so I learned a lot right away. My eyes were opened up, even though I grew up in the city, and I grew up in an area where, there was mafia, there was a lot of things, but it wasn't nearly like what I was working in now. All of a sudden, I started seeing people throw garbage out of windows, hearing gunshots go off, stepping over the vials, because heroin was huge at that time, and it was just a lot of junkies walking around. It was just really bad. New York City at the time was in crisis. Went from there up to the 2-0 precinct briefly for about a month, and somebody in the borough said, why do we need all these cops on the Upper West Side of Manhattan? So they sent me further up the Upper West Side of Manhattan to the 3-0 precinct, West Harlem, the Sugar Hill precinct, it's called. Tom ended up working there a few years later, but it's just a small command, 22 blocks by like 5 blocks long, like 115 cops assigned to it. And we're doing, at the time, 50, 60 homicides a year in that little area. It was
that little area.
Yeah. And when crack hit in 1985, things went right up off the scale with violence. All of a sudden, we're dealing with a lot of founded shots fired jobs, a lot of drug robberies, a lot of craziness. And man, I had guys blow off guns right near me. A guy blew himself almost up with a 12 gauge trying to hide it from me. I arrested a Cuban Marielito guy. I was on a foot post, got a call for calls for help, go up into an apartment right before Christmas. This guy was a Cuban Marielito Freedom Flotilla guy from Cuba that President Carter let in the country, and he had tattoos on his finger right here that said that he was a convicted murderer. He had a 15-year-old daughter who was doing homework in the apartment with a neighbor kid from the building she was in school with. He comes in loaded and decides that's inappropriate. I have to kill you for my daughter's honor. They're both clothed, sitting there. Takes out a machine gun that ESU later said, I've never seen anything like it. It was like World War II. And tries to kill her, but he can't load the magazine. And neighbors are calling for the screams for help. I come running up by myself on a foot post with a 6-shot Smith & Wesson, pea shooter, my 10-layer Kevlar vest, and I meet Tony Montana with his machine gun. And I just scream at him, drop the gun. And he actually did. And he ran out the fire escape, up the fire escape to the roof, and I caught him. And if he wasn't so drunk, it would have been a very different situation. But
I just want to interject because there's a huge point that I want to make. We've got to take our first break, but the whole you being on foot patrol, because that doesn't happen anymore. We got to take a quick break. We will be right back. Stay tuned, everybody.
Move freely, America, without medical restrictions or penalty. Without medical freedom legislation in place, our rights and freedoms are one vote away from being dissolved. Move freely, America, with one voice, without fear of retribution, achieving a common goal, medical freedom. We the people make our voices heard by connecting with state legislators and engaging a constitutionally compliant medical bill of rights for all citizens. Individually, change is improbable, but as an aggregate, attainable. It's time to act with one voice. My voice.
And my voice.
And my voice.
And my voice.
To protect our freedom, creating one voice that cannot be ignored. This requires your voice, too. Move Freely America. Go to movefreelyamerica.org to find a chapter near you. Plug in, donate, and help our legislators defend our God-given rights under the Constitution. Move Freely America. My voice.
And my voice.
And together with your voice, we're one voice that cannot be ignored. Donate today. MoveFreelyAmerica.org.
Hey, welcome back to Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam. We have Dan Murphy and Tom Smith, retired NYPD detectives with an extensive history, lots of years between them, and lots of cases solved and unsolved, as we all know. Just before we took the break, Dan was telling us about walking a foot post, which, as Sam said before, man, we really got away from the community policing. We got away from having those foot posts. Maybe in New York they still have it, but Dan, you were walking a foot post, and you have a Cuban freedom fighter that is running up a fire escape, which a lot of people outside of New York have no idea what a fire escape is.
Go ahead, please.
No, what I wanted to say is, take a second and think about how we police today and how it's changed. Dan, if you had not been walking that foot post, is she going to be with us today? I mean,
that's right? A real good question. I happened to be on the street down below, and I ran up 4 or 5 flights, whatever it was, and got there fairly quickly.
Right.
You technically on a shot, all it was calls for help. I had no idea. I got a machine gun. But you're right. You do, there's something to be said for connecting with the community and being on foot. And I took advantage of that to always try to make a friend, always try to find somebody who's a friendly, even in the middle of a neighborhood that's filled with drugs and violence. There are legitimate people who want to talk to you, maybe not in the street, but they'll tell you stuff.
Yeah.
And I found it just beneficial to be, and I speak enough Spanish where it helped. There was a lot of Latins in that neighborhood. But
some of your best informants come from there, man. They really do.
Lots of people don't want their kids growing up in that environment. Then they're happy to talk to the police. They just can't be seen doing it on the street because they'll get killed. It's that simple.
Right. Exactly.
There was a lot of money involved back then with crack. So, yeah, it was a different time. So I had a lot of great experiences. I learned a lot. I worked with some very good veteran cops who I picked up a lot from. And then I went on to another borough unit, the Manhattan North Task Force, and worked in the 3-4 precinct every night at the time when it was completely out of control. It was the crossroads for drugs from the Cali cartel in Queens throughout the entire northeast coast of the United States. So you'd get a call and you could end up, somebody'd end up coming in on a call for help or some stupid thing. You get a knock on the door and the guys are throwing kilos and guns out the window and jumping out the window and crazy stuff. At some point I really started watching detectives work and decided I wanted to be a detective though. I liked the nature of coming into a scene, making sense out of something after the fact, and not just being the guy doing the report, passing it along. Like you respond to patrol, somebody shot dead. Okay, you do your report. You do your aided card. You assist as you can. You vouch for the evidence as the first officer, but that's it. And detectives take it. And I really wanted to do detective work. I thought it was something I could gravitate to, and I got very lucky to get into that track. Went to the Manhattan Warrant Squad, learned how to find people. Interesting. That's a big part of the case. Okay, you've identified somebody. Now find this knucklehead. Where is he?
Yeah. And back then we didn't have the technology we have now. So it was all paper, and it was real gumshoe footwork, man, back then.
Oh yeah. A lot of it was mind games, calling people up on the phone and confirming they live someplace by lying about something completely, or getting them to come down to court when they're, due to do 5 to 10 or something, and telling them the case is being dismissed. I just need you to sign this thing, and all this crazy stuff. But that was really good experience, and I got very fortunate from there to go on to narcotics, and narcotics in Brooklyn North at the time. And Brooklyn North at the time was probably the most homicide-ridden stretch of territory in America. And I think I see John nodding, and he knows it was. I
was in Brooklyn North narcotics. We worked out of the Navy Yard.
Yep. So did I.
Thing.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It was it was not a good place. It was a great place for a cop if it was fish in a barrel, so to speak, in terms of drug arrests, but lots of guns, lots of danger, lots of craziness, and you learn quick to be sharp. You learn to rely on your partners. You learn teamwork, and you learn to develop informants and talk to people. Had an incident one time. One of my favorite things that happened when I was in Brooklyn with narcotics was that we were working in Bushwick, covering the 83rd precinct, which right now is kind of a trendy place to live, but at the time was kind of a dump. I mean, in terms, not the people, but it's just the neighborhood was run down, a lot of drugs and stuff. And so we're doing a day tour on a Saturday. I'll never forget it. And we're driving in with some arrests, and we drive past a jewelry store on, I think it was Knickerbocker Avenue, that had been shot up. Somebody killed a jeweler. And we drove past, it looks like a robbery gone bad. We go into the station house, processing our prisoners. And one of the guys that we arrested was a guy who was not a street dealer, but he was somebody from the spot upstairs that brought down 100 bundles, 10 decks in a bundle of heroin to up the dealer on the street. So he's got enough for the next half hour, next hour, whatever. And it's a busy, busy heroin location. As we pulled up after the undercover bought, we grabbed him. He almost had a heart attack. He drops the box with all these. So now we got a guy who's looking at an A2 felony. So we're like, okay, my partner, Billy Walsh, and I were very keen on trying to make informants, wanted to make cases. So we take him in the bathroom of the station house, and we're like, you're done, dude. We're telling him, you got a long way to go with this. We can help you right now. It's fresh. The whole world doesn't know you're here. What do you know? He won't tell us anything about drugs. So finally, I'm like, okay, well, do you know anybody who's killed anybody? And he puts his head down, looks around. He goes, yeah, Pippi. I said, who's Pippi? Well, Pippi tried to sell me a Mac 10 last night that he used in a homicide. He wants to get rid of it. It's hot. Pippi's crazy. He's been shooting people. I'm like, okay. You have Pippi's number? I got Pippi's number. Okay, cool. We go upstairs to detectives. I walk into the squad. I go, anybody know a Pippi? They all turned around. Pippi! They've been looking for this guy for like 3 weeks. He's been killing people like crazy. So my informant, we bring him right upstairs. We negotiate this whole situation where he's going to call him and Pippi's going to come and bring the gun. But before we do that, he tells us, another thing, Pippi's bragging about killing cops in Puerto Rico. Really? Yeah. He just got here. He just came up from Puerto Rico a couple of weeks ago. I don't know his real name, but he said he's been killing cops. He killed a bunch of cops in Puerto Rico. So one of the cops in the squad, Puerto Rican, speaks it very fluently, calls down to Puerto Rico and gets some cops on the line from Catalina and tells them the name Pippi. And they go, oh, yeah. Turns out Pippi is Puerto Rico's most wanted fugitive. He killed 2 cops, shot another, killed a cop in St. Thomas, I think. Guy's a one-man killing wave. He killed 4 or 5 people in Brooklyn in the past week and a half. And so we set him up, and he comes down with the Tech 9 under a jacket. The guy gives us a signal, that's Pippi, and he fights like a lunatic, of course. But that was rewarding because that was a simple street operation that turned into stopping a killer from continuing to kill.
Yeah.
And that's what detectives do. You look at it.
It brought closure to a lot of the families.
Oh, yeah. I mean, who knows how many people are alive today with families and grandkids because of that? And I'm not patting myself. It was a team effort. A lot of people did it, but that's what cops and detectives do. We take a shred of information and we make it real. And it was very satisfying to me.
Well, that's amazing. And international, sort of, kind of, because Puerto Rico is a territory, but not on the shores of the U.S. That's really cool. Tom, we're going to take our next break. We're going to come back with you. We want to hear about your story, and then maybe the same thing that Dan shared, like one of the cases that impacted you.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll be right back, everybody. Stay tuned.
Interested in starting a podcast or TV show? Worried about what you'll say and how to keep it engaging? Think you'd like to be a guest on podcast, radio, or TV shows? Hi, I'm Susan Hamilton, owner and founder of OBBM Network, and I would like to invite you to an OBBM media training to get the tools you need for a relaxed and polished performance you'll be proud to share. Our specialized training techniques include role play, voice training, and everything you need to deliver a confident, clear, and engaging interaction. Go to offbeatbusiness.com. Go to the calendar and register for a training that's convenient for you. Dates available now, 214-714-0495.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam, with our special guests, Dan Murphy and Tom Smith. Both retired NYPD detectives with extensive histories and their own podcast, The Gold Shield Show. Check them out because the stories are amazing from across the nation. Before we left, we were hearing from Tom about how a simple drug bust turned out to get a conviction on an international murder case of police officers and civilians alike. So, what this does, it really uplifts our younger cops to show that even the slightest little drug bust, but if you know how to talk to somebody, you know what? It always leads to a further investigation. And I'm happy that the detectives at that time didn't go, all right, kid, we got it, and steal it from narcotics like they usually do. But yeah, I'm glad that they worked with you, and I'm glad it turned out well. So thanks, Dan, for sharing that. Tom, I'm sure you have some impactful stories as well. The 3-4 was Louis Adamone in there when you were there?
No, I was actually in the 3-0.
You were in the 3-0. Yep. Dan, was Louis there? Louis Adamone, chief?
I think he was after I went back onto the warrant squad. I think he was a CO up there. He was my captain. He was my XO in the 2-0 precinct briefly. Yeah.
And back then, things were done. You had the backing by chiefs like Louis Adamone, who would turn around and say, hey, let's shake some trees and see what falls out. You were able to do your job, and thank God you were allowed to do your job in this case. So, Tom, how about you?
Well, I grew up in an NYPD family. My dad was an NYPD detective through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Woo-hoo. So the hard times of New York is what I grew up with. And
wearing the reefer coats.
Oh, yeah, the long coats. And a funny story about that, I remember one time I saw a picture of my dad, and it was taken in the 50s, and he had the long reefer coat on. I asked him, how'd you chase anyone in that? He goes, we never ran. So okay.
They had the call boxes, right?
Oh, yeah.
He had his no radios.
Yep. He had his key. He still had that. So I grew up in that world, and I used to go to the 4-4 squad and the 4-1 squad before a Yankee game, with him and see all his friends. And I actually got to know his partners. And that's what drove me into wanting to become a cop, seeing that friendship and that bond that he had with so many of his partners. And being a detective in the NYPD was all I wanted to do. I grew up with that mindset and got on the job in 1990. And the only thing I wanted to do was get that gold shield.
You got on in 1990?
Yes.
What class?
9068.
We were in the same academy. I was 9045.
Okay, in October 1990.
Yeah. October 15th.
Yep.
Rookies. We were in the same academy class.
One of the biggest classes that was ever put in.
Yeah. There's over 2,100 of us.
Yeah. During the show, sometimes in other shows we're on, people ask us about becoming a cop in the NYPD and what it's like now compared to then. And I blow them away when our test, John, 80,000 people took that test, and you look at it today and they're struggling to get 100 people into an academy.
We just brought that up at the workshop, and thank you for correcting me, because I thought a little over 20,000 took our test, so maybe 80,000 took our test this year. Out of I think only 2,700 signed up, but only 1,300 took the test.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't even cover our attrition.
No, not at all. It's sad. It's too bad what's going on in the NYPD today. Spending more than half your life there and loving the job like we all did. I never wanted to do anything else. That was it. And I wanted to do it in that department because, my dad was my hero, my mentor, and that's what I wanted to be. So in 90, I got on and I actually was there, like Dan had mentioned, through the beginning part of my career when the city was out of control with almost 3,000 homicides and 110,000 robberies. I mean, it was nonstop every night on the street. Whether you're walking or you were riding a car, you didn't stop all night while you were on patrol. And luckily, in 1994, we were there when the big change happened. And Bill Bratton got there, and Louis Enema mentioned, John Timoney, all changed the NYPD around and let cops be cops again. Because their view was, in order for the city to change around and become safe again, the cops need to do their job. And not only us, and this is a point I always bring up, you see it today with the lack of commitment prosecutors have. And the reason that New York City was able to change and get back, get to one of the safest cities in the country was because one of the things that Bratton insisted on was the district attorney's office being on board with their plan. Because his idea was, if my cops are going to go out and do their job, it's not going to work if you don't keep them in jail. And you see the polar opposite today of what's going on in the country. And that's the reason we're in the state we're in now in these big cities. So, I got to see kind of the hard side and then the side of letting us be cops again and do our job. And like Dan said, I loved going to work every day. It was the best thing in the world, and was assigned to the 3-0 precinct up in the west side.
Out of the academy?
Out of the academy. We didn't have, the NSUs went away, Yep. So I got assigned right to the 3-0, spent a couple of years in uniform, and then got assigned to the anti-crime unit, which was the best part of being there. Then went to narcotics in the Bronx, got out of Manhattan North and went to the Bronx, which narcotics was probably, other than JTTF, which was a completely different animal, narcotics was the most fun I had on the job. We had a great team. We were tight. We were close. We knew each other's moves when we would do a warrant. And we did a lot of warrants and a lot of big cases. We hated doing B&B, so we wanted to do cases.
It was overtime.
It was overtime, but it was just like, it was hard overtime deal with what you had to deal with. So we would have rathered do the cases. So we got so involved in a lot of big cases, and one in particular, my partner Carlos Perez ran, that we got hooked up with DETF and took down a Venezuelan crew and got a seizure of, I think it was 214 kilos of cocaine.
Wow.
In a parking garage in the Bronx, which we were up on wires with the DEA. So that was a very memorable case in narcotics. But narcotics was just a great time. Doing search warrants, there was nothing like it. There was no adrenaline rush on the job like doing a search warrant.
Let me just fill Sam in real quick. And the reason
we did warrants. We did warrants. I remember my first one, I was throwing up.
Back in the 90s, when you lock somebody up, right? It wasn't like today where you just bring people in the system and you're done in 3 hours and you do your paperwork. You go to central booking in the Bronx it's 3 days you're there. You're locking your guy up to a pole, and you're laying on crates for 3 days waiting to see an ADA.
Wow.
Yeah. For 3 days before you even get to speak to ADA. Then you bring him in, and then the revolving door of justice puts him back out on the street. That was in the early 90s. And I'm sure in the 80s, late 80s, it was the same way. But you made huge overtime throughout your career on that.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
that we were getting paid well back then either.
Right. But every little bit helped.
Yeah.
You know, so then from there, met Danny in the Bronx gang unit, where he was my sergeant in the gang unit. That's where we first met in 1998. Then after that, went to the 5-2 robbery squad, and then 9/11 happened. And 9/11, as we all know, changed everyone's life and changed everyone's career. And I was no different, you know, changed Danny's life. And we both got picked up and assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force right after 9/11, where I spent the last 17 years of my career working in JTTF. And what an incredible experience I had, going to about 18 different countries, running counterterrorism investigations. Spent 3 months in Afghanistan doing a kidnapping case. But one of the most satisfying cases, as we were discussing, wasn't overseas. It wasn't you know, this big thing with a big terrorist group. It actually happened to be stopping a school shooting in my hometown, where I was living. Wow. At the time, I was assigned to one of the satellite offices, which was in upstate New York, where I was living at the time. So I was basically a cop in my town, pretty much, but with the FBI covering, you know, numerous counties. And we got a tip one day of a kid that was in a chat room throwing out, you know, what if scenarios. What if someone shot the school up? What if someone left a note in the classroom that there was going to be a shooting? So we jumped on board with that, me and my partner, along with the local guys. And the interesting part, or the tough part of that case, was 2 of my kids were still at that school. So I was running an investigation to stop a school shooting at a school 2 of my kids were at.
Wow.
How do you do that? How do you mentally adjust to that?
It was really difficult to do, but I kind of just focused on what I needed to do. We had the guy, we knew who it was, we had him identified, we had him under surveillance, we had all his social media platforms that we were monitoring. With the help, my partner did a phenomenal job doing that, because she was a tech geek and knew all that, and had all these covert accounts that he just gravitated to right away. So we were able to really stay on top of him, and we pinpointed it because of the interviews we were doing. We pinpointed the day of the attack, that the attack was going to take place, was going to be the last day of school. So as we were monitoring him, we found out that his 2 heroes in life were the 2 Columbine shooters. You know, he just loved them. He loved what they did. He loved Nicholas Cruz down in Parkland, down in Florida. He just had this obsession with school shooters. So when it came time to kind of getting close to locking him up, he had sent one more post out, and it said, "I need a gun." So we said, all right, that's it. We're done. Got the DA involved, got the arrest warrant, got the search warrant to his house. And at the time, he was actually in Maryland playing in a basketball tournament. So we were able to get into the house. His father was home. We were waiting for him to come back, because we knew he was on his way home with his mother. So we were able to kind of hang out or hide in the house until he pulled in the driveway. We ran out, grabbed him out of the car, locked him up. And through the course of the search warrant, we found the diagram to the classroom that he was going to commit this act in. The desks circled in red of the people he was going to kill, and on the back of that paper was the hit list. The 5 kids that he had lined up that he was going to take out. So that was probably the most satisfying case I can do, because it saved my kids. It saved a community from becoming very famous around the world because of a horrible act. And, you know, we were able to lock him up for 5 years, which we all wish it could be longer, you know, but what we had to deal with, and, you know, with the crimes we charged him with, 5 was, we were okay with that.
Now,
wow, that is amazing.
Right?
That is amazing. We are talking with Dan Murphy and Tom Smith for the Gold Shield Show. We got to take a quick break. We will be right back after this message.
Look, when you need to respond to an aggressive situation to protect yourself, your family, or your property, understanding your firearm and legal position are critical. Officers know your skills are only as good as your commitment to training. So know what you're doing. So when you're in a vulnerable situation, we can count on your response. Whether you're a beginner or a licensed gun carrier, Carry in Texas offers basic firearms training, Texas permitless carry courses, license to carry, and basic 2A courses so you can understand the responsibilities, situational awareness, and learn the technical skill required when you carry your firearm. Go to carryintexas.com to find the right course for you. Join me, former United States Secret Service agent Samantha Horwitz, on the range for beginner basics, LTC prep, and range practice. Go to carryintexas.com today. That's carryintexas.com.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam, with our special guests Dan Murphy and Tom Smith, both NYPD detectives with extensive careers. Now, Tom, you were just talking about, we were listening to both your stories and some memorable stories, which you can listen to all the time on their podcast if you go to goldshield.com, and you can hear these amazing stories from detectives across the nation. These are real life stories that either warm your heart or either scare the shit out of you, either one. But this is what the true men and women in law enforcement do each and every day to protect us. And Tom, you were talking about the school shooting that you actually, through the internet and through detective skills, were able to flush this kid out. And what scares me is he's not one of those kids that's sitting in a trench coat in his room. He's out playing a tournament basketball. He's hidden in plain sight. What was his parents? I mean, what were his parents like, and what were their reactions when you locked him up?
Well, Dad was an alcoholic. Mom, we always thought, had kind of an inside track in knowing what was going on. Maybe not the details of it, but had more of an understanding of maybe what he was thinking than Dad. And I say that because of what else we found in the house. We found stockpiles of research papers he did on every serial killer you could think of. They were like term papers that he would do, that he had in bundles around the house. So they weren't, if we found them, they weren't hard to find,
They're
so
red flags.
Right. Which you would have hoped, would have come to the forefront with the parents, but they didn't. They weren't that shocked when we arrested them, as much as you would think they would be. Dad was a little bit more upset than Mother was, and that drew us more into kind of maybe understanding what was going on and what needed to be done.
Mom was probably more relieved. She was probably like, she knew, like you said, she probably had that intuition and she knew about it. And she was probably relieved at some level, going, man, thank God this kid is off the streets. She probably couldn't say anything or do anything. Don't know the family dynamic in that, but she was probably, wow, thank God, because the aftermath would have been horrible for everybody.
Yeah, horrible.
And you guys share a lot on your show. You've been separated from the job for a while. What that we talk about, building your mental health and wellness resiliency toolbox. What would you say are some of the cases, or maybe there's one that has really stayed with you? Because if listeners go and to your website and they listen to the first couple of shows, and you can see the transition into the years that people have been on and how it's kind of affected them. Some of them have done good things with it, but stuff stays.
Yeah. It's funny. We started the show with the idea of being a true crime show and highlighting the exceptional work done by men and women of law enforcement, and giving a backstage pass. And we still stick true to our roots in that respect. But we have found the show has naturally sort of gravitated towards the topic of wellness, because it's impossible to talk about the dedication and commitment of the men and women in law enforcement without talking about the price that's paid for giving that much of yourself to a profession and a world. And as unique, well, not to every profession, but semi-unique to police work, level of stress. Military sees it, firefighters can see it, first responders, a lot of people have it, but it's very acute in law enforcement. So many people struggle during the career and then after. Once you retire, What am I going to do with myself now? How do I deal with these feelings that I pushed down for years? I had been to some gruesome crime scenes in my career. I had seen some nasty stuff. It was really bad days. And I'm not talking about one drug dealer shoots another on the street. It's a human life. And at some point, you care about a human life. I'm talking innocent people. 9/11 was shocking to the senses of all of us. It was just simply overwhelming. And anybody who says that they were there in a first responder and a rescue worker capacity who claims to not have been affected by it is either a sociopath who's stoic or is a complete liar. There's no way it didn't change you, right? I mean, and I remember distinctly 2 months almost to the day, I think it was November 12th, after September 11th attacks, American Airlines Flight 587 crashed in Rockaway, Queens.
Yes.
That was bound for the Dominican Republic, and it had taken off behind another plane, and for whatever aerodynamic reason, it was going down. And the pilots were brave enough and smart enough to dump all the fuel as much as possible into the water before they hit the ground in that little beach community of Rockaway, Bell Harbor section. Mm-hmm. Now, they hit a corner, and I was at the World Trade Center that morning with my team. I was a sergeant in Taru at the time, technical assistance team. And we heard it come off a citywide radio, and we were just like, let's go. Because we thought we're under attack again.
Yeah.
Here you are, 2 months, right? 2 months into this exhaustion, emotional ups and downs of finding bodies and going to funerals and being exhausted and not seeing your family and not eating right, all of it. 2 months of that. And then all of a sudden this happens. And I was out there, and I remember being there all day, and it was just
in Rockaway. And that was a residential area that it crashed into. There's film footage, man. That was a horrific scene.
I saw cops I knew of every rank who lived in the area.
Yeah.
Who were off that day walking. I was like, oh my God, this is real stuff. And it was really horrible to deal with. And that leaves an impact on you. And there's times when I think about that. I mean, it's something that Tom and I think we're not shy about saying, yeah, we're human and we've had our issues with this.
Right.
But you're either smart and you're brave and you confront it, or you duck it and try to act like it's not there, and it takes you over. And what do we see? We see divorces, alcoholism, can't keep a job, all kinds of stuff that happens because you're a human being trying to deal with traumas that the average person shouldn't ever in a lifetime see.
Right.
Absolutely.
And back in the 90s, Tom, we were in the same academy class. I know my instructor when I was there said, you know what? You're welcome to the greatest show on earth, but 50% of you are going to be divorced by your fifth year, and it held true. So many of the cops that I know that I graduated with, one are either in jail, dead, or have been through 1, 2, 3 different marriages, 4 marriages, have issues. Do you see a trend? I know you said, Dan, you see a trend, but like when you discuss this with other detectives throughout the nation, there's a common denominator, right? You guys are seeing when you talk to these detectives that investigate these crimes that sometimes we never hear about it because they're from all over the country, how it affects them, right? And do you ever ask, like, what kind of resource, what are you doing for mental health? Like, how do you move on with that?
Sure. One of the things that came out with the show, like Dan said, we cover so many different topics of serial killers, of big cases, and roles and missions the military guys and girls went through. And one of the things that came out, or two of the things that came out, one, sometimes it's one impactful event that'll change their lives. And sometimes it's just your career, because sometimes we get so wrapped up in what we're doing, and it's case after case after case after case, that your body doesn't really catch up to staying fit and staying mentally ready and healthy, because you're always just to the next case until you can't anymore. We found that was a thing that, people would have these great careers and work on so many good cases, and then at one point they just couldn't take it anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's when the outreach starts. And Dan and I had mentioned it so many times on our show that back in our time when we first started, probably all of us, you didn't talk about it. Mm-hmm. No one dealt with it. You weren't allowed to talk about it, or you got your gun, your shield ripped from you. You sat on a desk on a midnight in the middle of Rockaway somewhere. counting radio cars in a parking lot. That was
Right.
going to be the rest of your career. So you got told by older cops and detectives, hey, you're a cop, deal with it. You'll be fine.
Mhm.
And that was the way you kind of grew up. And thankfully today, that mentality has changed, and there's so many avenues for help and assistance out there. And we bring it up all the time with the numerous, organizations that we're involved in that lend a hand and are out there. And thank God, there's so many of them out there, and they're great organizations that
Well,
do
how about-
such an incredible job.
Wait.
How about you two, Dan and Tom? Because there's trauma, there's visual trauma, then there's secondary trauma, right? So you hearing these stories all the time, what do you guys do? Because I'm sure there's things that bother you, but you'll hear it from another detective. It's got to trigger. It's got to trigger something in your memory. How will you guys handle it? What do you guys do to take care of your own self?
We'll take our last break. Think about it, because this is the quickest break. This is John's favorite, and then we'll have you guys answer. We'll be right back, everybody.
To the Health Engineer Show. I'm Cliff Buckley, the Health Engineer, right here on the Offbeat 50.
Hi, I'm Larry Cortampa. This is
Hi, my name is Susan Hamilton, and you're watching Offbeat.
Hi, this is Doreen Milano. Welcome to Big Ideas Small Business, where we will talk to Terry Arjala.
Hey, welcome back. Yeah, it's my favorite because I love coffee. Welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam and our special guests, Dan and Tom. We all worry about mental health in everybody. And and Dan and Tom, you guys hear these stories over and over and over again from people you don't know, but you guys have an extensive career where you've done a lot. So the secondary trauma that you guys are absorbing, how do you release that? Because it's got to trigger you. I know there are stories that all of a sudden I'll hear from another cop and it will trigger, oh my God, that was that 7-year-old. And it's something I never thought about in years, but all of a sudden something sparked and I was like, holy shit, I remember that. Does that do that? What do you guys do to overcome that or keep yourself mentally healthy on that?
That's a great question. And, it's true. We do listen to a lot of stories, and there are certainly things that can trigger things from our careers. I try to exercise. I try to sleep good, try to eat, as good as possible. Try to keep a regular schedule, try to have some balance in your life and not focus entirely on this stuff all day long, look for good things. And frankly, I lean a lot on and I have spent a lot of time, I hate to say investigating, but developing my faith. My church and my faith and the people I've got to know through that have meant a lot to me. They have anchored me in many ways. It helps keep things in perspective. I have a great wife who's very understanding, and she can look at me and tell when I'm triggered by something, and she'll ask, or she'll just do something to help make me think of something else. Distraction can be helpful.
Right. And a good support network is important.
Yeah, I think the support network is vitally important. Sometimes Tom and I will just talk about something for a few minutes, and I'll see. There's times when we're doing a show and I'm watching Tom when he's talked about some of his cases, and I can see the stress, and he's going back in his mind to what it's like to be in a life and death situation in Afghanistan in a war zone.
Yeah,
and it's understandable, and I can see it. But sometimes talking it out, a problem shared is a problem half, they say, right? And it really is. Knowing you have people you can talk to, and I think that's what we want to see for law enforcement. We don't ever want to see a cop do what is so normal in these situations, which is self-isolate, tuck it down, and pretend it's not there.
Yeah,
absolutely. Tom, with the short time we have left, what do you do?
Yeah, the same type of thing. I have, thank God in heaven, I have a wife that tomorrow is our 31st wedding anniversary.
Oh, congratulations. Happy anniversary.
So she has been around from the before the beginning. And part of it was talking things out. And just getting that release out. One of the things Dan and I have mentioned before, we both lived outside of the city, when we were on patrol. So that hour-long drive home was always the best thing in the world. Put the radio on, open the window, and kind of just take your time going home. But once I was home, my wife would know immediately what was going on, if we had a rough night, if something happened. It got difficult once I was in JTTF because I wasn't allowed to talk about anything. So that was more talking it out with people at work or playing sports, which I did my entire life, which was the best outlet I had. And like Dan said, me and him, we'll talk. If we have an impactful show with someone like Tanya Owen or Kimber Gist or, a number of others that we've had with big traumatic events, Danny and I'll stay on the call after the show's done and talk for 15 minutes, 20 minutes about it. Because we've all either been in that situation or came real close to being in that situation, which could have happened in a millisecond. So all of us understanding what this job is helps in talking things out.
Well, that's amazing. This whole segment, we've had a banner for everybody listening. It's the Gold Shield Show, and you can listen in at thegoldshieldshow.com. That's 1S, thegoldshieldshow.com.
1S for savings.
Kind of like comes out all together, so it sounds like it's the same thing. But go there, listen to these stories, take it in, because these are the stories. Some of them you've seen, have made the news and big headlines, but these are what officers do every single day. And so the next time you see police, thank you for what you do, because we do this from a place that others can't. They just can't, and that's okay. But it's an honor, such an honor to have you guys on. Again, we'll be listening to your all show. Please, if you've got an incredible story for your law enforcement career, they have a contact page, reach out to them. And do you guys have certain days? Like, when's the release of new shows?
We usually, our recording dates are usually on Thursdays unless our guest schedule changes, which we're open to. We're fine with that. And they'll be out the following week. We're our producer, thank God for him, and thank God for our graphic designer, because we don't have a show. We're sitting in a basement talking on, strings and a can if we don't have our producer and our graphic designer involved in the show.
Well, we know how that is too. And thank you, OBBM Network, for helping us out. So check out the Gold Shield Show. Incredible stories. Thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast. We wish you Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all the best, and keep doing what you're doing. Keep putting these stories out there, because it's life-changing for everybody that listens.
Dan, you got something?
I just got a quick shout out, if you don't mind. First, thank you so much for having. You do great honor to us, and you're doing great honor to the profession. Thank you. You guys are awesome. Secondly, keep in your prayers the two officers from the 101st Precinct in Far Rockaway, Queens, who yesterday morning responded to a typical run-of-the-mill call and were confronted by a lunatic who just killed 4 people with a knife, stabbed the 5th, and then stabbed the 2 cops before he was shot dead. Keep them in your prayers. That's law enforcement, ladies and gentlemen. And those 2 officers have to live and relive that moment for the rest of their lives. So let's keep them in our thoughts and prayers. And
I'm just going to tag on that because I got frustrated with that. And to Eric Adams, all right, me and you work together, you douche. Stop. You're all about pickpockets. They're going to expand the pickpocket team in Manhattan. How about worrying about the officers that are on the street, not worrying about pickpockets? There's murders, rapes, homicide. There's so much shit going on. Eric, get your head out of your ass and take care of your men and women.
I think we just had a mic drop moment. So on that, thank you guys. We will be in touch.
Thank you very, very much.
Take care, guys.
Right, take care.
Stay blessed.
Oh, this is fantastic. Again, go to the Gold.
That just triggered me.
Yeah, I think so. You need another cup. You need another cup.
It pissed me off so much. I saw a news article that Eric Adams was he was growing the pickpocket unit in Manhattan, and then I hear this where these 2 officers get stabbed, and this guy just murdered 4 of his family members with a knife, and nothing's really said about it. Eric wasn't even on the news.
Well, there's
it pissed me off.
There's a whole reason why it didn't make the news and why things are completely sideways, especially in the profession that we do. But that's a whole nother show that we can bring a guest on to talk about. Huge, again, thank you. Go to the goldshieldShow.com. check it out or listen on Spotify.
And see what it will do for you? It really gets your energy up.
John's going to go run the lab after this.
Man.
Hey, we just got off an incredible workshop. If you want more information about what we do, how you can get involved, go to abadgeofhonor.org. There are incredible workshops that are coming up in January and 2024. We've got events like Walk the Bridge. You go to our website, click on events, you'll see the entire calendar. And I think the end of January will be our next workshop. If you want to put something in the toolbox for the men and women that attend, please reach out to us. If you would like to sponsor lunch for these guys, and I mean women too, these guys, you know,
you guys,
I worked in New York too, these guys, please reach out, let them know that you care, because the businesses that have been reaching out to us that are getting involved, these are the ones that the officers and dispatch and everyone's going to turn to first when they need whatever your business is offering. So thank you so much. That's abadgeofhonor.org. John, you know, I say it every week, we have got to keep our first responders in our prayers. We're praying for you every day. Thank you to our veterans. And thank you to those overseas on active duty, answering the call over there to keep us safe here at home. John, take us home.
The only thing I'm just gonna reiterate what Dan said. Keep those two officers from the 101 in your prayers throughout this holiday season. And if you could be anything in this world, just be kind. Peace.
See you next week, everybody.
A Badge of Honor podcast is produced for the OBBM Network podcast and protected under copyright law. For content permissions, please submit your request to abadgeofhonor.com on the content page. For OBBM Network programming information, please call 214-714-0495 today.